Ladies and gentlemen, life is suffering. This is an inescapable truth. The question is not whether you will suffer, but rather how you will suffer. You don't get to opt out of sacrifice. You only get to choose what you will sacrifice. Will you sacrifice your potential for comfort? Will you trade long-term fulfillment for short-term pleasure? Or will you take up the burden of responsibility, delay gratification, and aim for something higher? The path forward is not easy, but it is meaningful. You must decide, will you sacrifice who you could be for who you are today, or will you sacrifice your weaknesses, your vices, and your excuses to become something greater? Pick your sacrifice, because if you don't, life will choose it for you. Sacrifice is not something you can avoid. It is something you must confront. Every decision you make is a choice between competing sacrifices. If you choose comfort today, you may be sacrificing growth tomorrow. If you choose discipline, you sacrifice ease. The question is not whether you will sacrifice, but rather whether you will do it willingly or have it imposed upon you by circumstance. People often seek a life free of suffering, a path devoid of hardship, but such a thing does not exist. You either choose your sacrifice or it chooses you. Consider the person who refuses to put in the effort required to improve their skills, thinking they are avoiding struggle. In reality, they are sacrificing their potential, their future opportunities, and perhaps even their dignity when they find themselves unprepared for life's challenges. On the other hand, the person who embraces sacrifice, who chooses to work hard, to forego distractions, to discipline themselves, gains something of far greater value. They are making a conscious decision to trade immediate gratification for long-term meaning. This is the fundamental structure of reality. You pay a price for everything. The question is whether you are willing to pay it on your own terms. Look at the world around you. Every successful person, every individual who has achieved something significant has done so by sacrificing comfort. The athlete who trains relentlessly sacrifices leisure but gains strength, skill, and victory. The student who studies instead of wasting time sacrifices entertainment but gains knowledge and opportunity. The entrepreneur who takes risks sacrifices security but creates something meaningful in return. These people are not free of suffering. They have simply chosen which suffering they are willing to endure. That is the difference between a person who lives with purpose and a person who drifts aimlessly. Most people do not consciously pick their sacrifice. Instead, they run from difficulty, hoping to escape the price that must be paid. But the price does not disappear. It accumulates interest. The person who refuses to exercise because it is hard may enjoy temporary comfort, but they sacrifice their health in the long run. The person who avoids responsibility because it is burdensome may feel free for a time, but eventually they find themselves trapped in a life of mediocrity. This is the cruel reality of avoidance. What you refuse to confront today will return tomorrow, often in a much worse form. To sacrifice willingly is to take control of your life. It is to acknowledge that there is a price for everything and to decide what you are willing to pay for something greater. If you do not consciously choose, life will force the choice upon you. The person who refuses to work hard in their youth may find themselves struggling in old age. The person who avoids difficult conversations may find themselves trapped in shallow relationships. The person who never disciplines their mind may become a slave to their impulses. These sacrifices were not chosen. They were simply the natural consequences of avoidance. When you pick your sacrifice, you engage in a trade. You give up one thing to gain another. But if you do not make the trade willingly, you often end up losing both. The person who refuses to sacrifice comfort for discipline loses both comfort and the rewards of discipline. The person who avoids responsibility loses both their freedom and the benefits of maturity. This is why sacrifice must be made with intention. It must be seen as an investment, not a punishment. People often fear sacrifice because it requires the unknown. It demands that you give up something familiar for something uncertain. But growth itself is a sacrifice. To become someone new, you must shed who you were. That is painful. It requires leaving behind habits, people, and environments that no longer serve you. It requires facing discomfort. But the alternative is stagnation, and stagnation leads to decay. If you refuse to grow, life does not simply pause for you. It moves on without you. The cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of sacrifice. The reality is that everything valuable comes at a price. Love requires sacrifice. Success requires sacrifice. Wisdom requires sacrifice. Wisdom requires sacrifice. There is no escaping this truth. The difference between those who thrive and those who suffer is not the absence of sacrifice, but the willingness to embrace it on their own terms. People are naturally drawn to comfort, to pleasure, to ease. The appeal of instant gratification is undeniable. It provides a quick escape, a fleeting sense of happiness, a momentary relief from the burdens of existence. But what people often fail to realize is that every time they choose short-term pleasure over long-term growth, they are making a trade, whether they acknowledge it or not. Every indulgence has a cost, every shortcut has consequences, and every moment of avoidance compounds into something much larger over time. The pursuit of immediate pleasure is not free. It is borrowed happiness from the future, and eventually the debt must be paid. When someone consistently prioritizes pleasure, they are unknowingly setting themselves up for long-term suffering. The person who spends hours scrolling through social media instead of working on their skills might feel entertained in the moment, but later they will face the painful reality of wasted potential. The person who eats whatever they want, whenever they want, without discipline, may enjoy the taste of indulgence today, but will struggle with the consequences of poor health later. The student who procrastinates to avoid stress feels temporary relief, but when deadlines approach and panic sets in, they suffer far more than if they had simply endured the initial discomfort of discipline. People think they are avoiding suffering by choosing pleasure, but in truth, they are merely delaying it, often making it worse. Small, impulsive decisions may seem insignificant at first, but they accumulate. A life built on easy choices does not remain easy. It becomes fragile, unstable, and riddled with regret. The person who avoids hard conversations in their relationships to keep the peace may enjoy temporary harmony, but resentment and misunderstandings will build over time, leading to much greater pain. The employee who avoids pushing themselves at work to stay comfortable may find that years later they are stuck in the same position, watching others surpass them. Pain deferred is pain multiplied. The cost of indulging in comfort today is often far greater than the discomfort of discipline. This is because pleasure is deceptive. It promises happiness, but rarely delivers it in a lasting form. The thrill of a moment fades quickly, and what is left behind is often emptiness. True fulfillment, true satisfaction does not come from indulging every impulse, but from resisting them in the pursuit of something meaningful. The greatest achievements in life require sacrifice, patience, and effort. They demand that you forego temporary pleasure for something greater. Society reinforces the illusion that pleasure is the highest good. Advertisements, social media, entertainment, all of it is designed to feed the desire for immediate gratification. People are constantly bombarded with messages telling them to enjoy life now, to seek comfort, to avoid struggle. But what is rarely spoken about is the price of such a mindset. People who chase pleasure relentlessly often find themselves lost, unfulfilled, and disconnected from anything truly meaningful. The endless pursuit of comfort leads to a kind of numbness where nothing is ever enough. They need more stimulation, more distractions, more external validation to fill the void, but it never truly satisfies. Discipline, on the other hand, is difficult. It requires sacrifice, patience, and resilience. It is not immediately rewarding in the way that pleasure is. But what it builds over time is something far more valuable. The person who consistently exercises despite the discomfort builds strength and health. The person who chooses to study and work hard, even when they don't feel like it, gains knowledge and opportunities. The person who invests in meaningful relationships rather than chasing fleeting pleasures finds deep and lasting connections. These things do not happen overnight, and they are not easy, but they are worth it. Short-term pleasure is enticing because it feels good now, while the consequences remain invisible for a time. But long-term suffering does not announce itself immediately. It creeps in slowly, until one day, a person wakes up and realizes they are trapped by their own choices. The dreams they once had seem out of reach. The person they hoped to become feels distant. The life they wanted slips further away, not because of any single catastrophic mistake, but because of countless small decisions that prioritized comfort over growth. The truth is that real happiness does not come from indulging in every desire. It comes from the sense of accomplishment, from knowing that you have done something difficult and meaningful. It comes from growth, from pushing past limitations, from becoming someone stronger than you were before. The difference between those who thrive and those who struggle is not intelligence, luck, or talent. It is the ability to choose long-term fulfillment over short-term pleasure, to endure discomfort in the pursuit of something greater. Delaying gratification is one of the most fundamental principles of success, yet it is also one of the most difficult to practice. People naturally seek comfort, pleasure, and immediate rewards, even when they know deep down that the things they truly want require patience and effort. The temptation to choose what feels good now over what will benefit you later is constant. It is easy to fall into the trap of seeking instant results, but true achievement is always built on the ability to wait, to sacrifice the present for the future, to endure short-term struggle in exchange for something far greater. The greatest rewards in life do not come quickly. They require time, discipline, and persistence. The person who wants to build a strong body cannot expect results after just a few workouts. They must resist the urge to quit when they do not see immediate progress. They must choose the discomfort of exercise over the fleeting pleasure of laziness, over and over again for months and years. The same principle applies to building wealth, mastering a skill, developing meaningful relationships, or achieving any goal of significance. If success came easily and instantly, everyone would have it. But most people are unwilling to put in the work without an immediate payoff, and that is why they never reach their full potential. The ability to delay gratification is what separates those who succeed from those who remain stuck. It is the difference between the student who studies diligently for years, earning the skills and knowledge that will shape their future, and the student who procrastinates, seeking temporary relief from discomfort and paying the price later. It is the difference between the entrepreneur who works tirelessly to build something meaningful and the person who gives up at the first sign of difficulty because they did not see results fast enough. It is the difference between the person who invests in their health and the person who constantly chooses the easiest, most pleasurable option, only to suffer later when the consequences catch up to them. Modern society has conditioned people to expect instant results. Everything is faster. Communication, entertainment, shopping, even food. People no longer have to wait for much. And as a result, patience is becoming a rare quality. But reality does not conform to these artificial expectations. Meaningful success still requires time. Mastery still demands years of practice. True relationships still take effort and commitment to build. The illusion of instant gratification is just that, an illusion. The things that truly matter cannot be rushed. People often quit too soon because they expect results on an unrealistic timeline. They start working on something, but when they do not see progress immediately, assume it is not working. They get frustrated and look for a shortcut, a way to speed up the process, but there are no real shortcuts to anything worthwhile. Growth happens slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, and only those who have the patience to persist through the early struggles ever see the rewards. The person who goes to the gym for a month and sees no visible change might feel discouraged and stop, not realizing that real transformation takes years. The writer who works on their craft but does not achieve recognition right away might feel like they are wasting their time, but they fail to see that mastery is built over decades. Those who understand this principle and commit to long-term effort are the ones who eventually rise above the rest. Delaying gratification is not just about waiting. It is about working while you wait. It is about continuing to move forward, even when there is no immediate evidence that your efforts are paying off. It requires trust in the process, belief in the long-term outcome, and the discipline to keep going when others would give up. This is why so few people achieve great things, not because they lack intelligence or talent, but because they lack patience. They want results now, and when they do not get them, they abandon the effort and move on to something else, repeating the cycle endlessly and never truly committing to anything. There is always a price to be paid. Either you pay it now through hard work, patience, and discipline, or you pay it later through regret, missed opportunities, and unrealized potential. The person who chooses to delay gratification understands this. They know that the pain of discipline is temporary, but the pain of regret lasts a lifetime. They accept that success is not about feeling good in the moment, but about making choices that will lead to something meaningful in the future. They are willing to sacrifice now so that they can reap the rewards later. In the end, they are the ones who build the life they truly desire. Responsibility is not just a burden. It is the foundation of a meaningful life. People often seek freedom without responsibility, believing that if they can avoid obligations, they will be happier. But the opposite is true. A life without responsibility quickly becomes empty, aimless, and chaotic. When you take responsibility, you give your life structure, you create purpose. You become the kind of person who can handle the difficulties of existence rather than being crushed by them. Many people avoid responsibility because it is difficult. It requires effort, sacrifice, and discipline. It forces you to confront your own weaknesses. It means accepting that the state of your life is, in large part, a result of your own choices. This is a painful realization, and it is much easier to blame circumstances, other people, or the world itself. But blaming external factors only leads to stagnation. It keeps you trapped, powerless to change your situation. Taking responsibility, on the other hand, gives you control. It shifts the focus from what is happening to you to what you can do about it. People who refuse responsibility often find themselves lost. They drift through life, reacting instead of acting, waiting for something external to fix their problems. They may seek distraction, indulgence, or escape, but none of these things provide real satisfaction. Avoiding responsibility does not make life easier. It makes it harder in the long run. The person who avoids financial responsibility ends up struggling with debt and insecurity. The person who avoids emotional responsibility finds themselves in shallow, unstable relationships. The person who avoids responsibility for their own growth remains stuck, watching others move forward while they stay in the same place. Responsibility is what gives life depth and significance. It is what allows you to build something lasting, something that matters. It is the difference between living passively and living with intention. People who take responsibility do not just let life happen to them. They shape it. They understand that their actions have consequences, and they willingly accept the weight of those consequences. They do not wait for someone else to solve their problems. They do not make excuses. They face challenges head on, even when it is difficult, because they know that this is the only way to grow. There is a kind of power in responsibility. When you take full ownership of your life, you are no longer a victim of circumstance. You become the person who determines your own path. You decide what kind of life you want to create. This does not mean that everything will go your way or that hardship will disappear, but it does mean that you will be able to handle whatever comes your way. You will be stronger, more capable, and more prepared for the inevitable difficulties of existence. People often think that responsibility limits them, that it ties them down or makes life less enjoyable. But the opposite is true. Responsibility is what allows you to build something worth having. The person who takes responsibility for their health enjoys the freedom of a strong body. The person who takes responsibility for their finances enjoys the freedom of financial security. The person who takes responsibility for their relationships enjoys the depth and trust that come from true connection. Responsibility does not take away freedom. It creates it. It creates it. Those who avoid responsibility often end up resenting those who embrace it. They look at successful people and assume that their success was handed to them, that they got lucky, that life was easier for them. But in most cases, this is not true. Successful people are often those who took on the greatest responsibility. They worked harder, endured more struggle, and made sacrifices that others were unwilling to make. They did not take the easy path, but because of that, they now have something of value. The person who avoids responsibility may feel envious of those who have achieved something, but what they fail to see is the years of effort, discipline, and sacrifice that went into it. Responsibility is not something to fear. It is something to embrace. It is something to embrace. It is what turns chaos into order, what transforms potential into reality. It is what separates those who live with purpose from those who simply exist. It is not always easy, and it is never comfortable, but it is the only way to build a life that is truly worth living. Those who take responsibility for their actions, their choices, and their future are the ones who rise above, who create meaning, who find fulfillment not in fleeting pleasures, but in the deep satisfaction of knowing they are living up to their potential. Suffering is an inescapable part of life. No one is exempt from it. Every person at some point will experience pain, loss, disappointment, and hardship. The world is not structured in a way that allows for a life free of suffering, and attempting to avoid it only leads to greater misery. The question is not whether you will suffer, but whether your suffering will have meaning. Will it be something that crushes you, that makes you bitter and resentful, or will it be something that shapes you, strengthens you, and gives you purpose? That is the choice every individual must make. Many people spend their lives running from suffering. They seek distraction, numb themselves with entertainment, avoid difficult conversations, and refuse to face the deeper struggles within them. But suffering does not disappear just because it is ignored. It grows in the shadows, taking on different forms. What could have been confronted early on, what could have been a source of strength, turns into something overwhelming, something that consumes a person entirely. The avoidance of suffering leads to greater suffering. The more someone runs from pain, the more control it has over them. The most resilient people are not those who have never suffered, but those who have faced suffering directly and refused to be destroyed by it. They have learned to bear the burden of existence without allowing it to break them. They have chosen to take responsibility in the midst of pain, to extract meaning from hardship rather than using it as an excuse for inaction. The person who endures the loss of a loved one and turns that pain into a reason to love others more deeply is stronger than the person who closes themselves off, afraid to feel. The person who experiences failure but refuses to be defeated, who instead learns from it and pushes forward, is stronger than the person who never tries again out of fear. Strength is not the absence of suffering. It is the ability to endure it without losing oneself. There is no true growth without suffering. The process of becoming more than you are now requires struggle. A person who never experiences hardship remains weak. They do not develop resilience, discipline, or wisdom. Growth comes through adversity, through pushing beyond limits, through enduring difficulty, through suffering for the sake of something greater. The athlete who wants to become stronger must endure pain in training. The student who wants to master a subject must endure frustration and struggle. And the person who wants to build meaningful relationships must endure vulnerability and the possibility of loss. Everything valuable is gained through some form of suffering. People often ask why suffering exists, why life must be filled with difficulty. But suffering is not just something to be endured. It is something that refines a person. It strips away weakness, forces individuals to confront their flaws, and reveals what truly matters. The greatest figures in history were not those who lived easy lives, but those who suffered greatly and used that suffering to achieve something meaningful. They did not ask, "Oh, why me?" They asked, "What can I do with this?" They understood that suffering was not just an obstacle, but a catalyst for growth. Some people allow suffering to define them in the worst way. They let it make them bitter, resentful, and hopeless. They use it as an excuse to withdraw from life, to give up, to blame others. They become trapped in their pain, seeing themselves as victims of a cruel world. But suffering does not have to lead to despair. It can be the foundation for strength, for wisdom, for purpose. The person who learns to carry their suffering with dignity, who refuses to be destroyed by it, who transforms it into something meaningful, that person becomes unshakable. Suffering teaches humility. It reveals that no one is invincible, that no one is above pain. It forces people to see the world more clearly, to understand the struggles of others, to develop compassion. The person who has never suffered cannot truly appreciate what it means to overcome, to persist, to find joy despite hardship. The greatest appreciation for life comes not from those who have never struggled, but from those who have known deep suffering and have risen above it. People have a choice in how they respond to suffering. They can allow it to crush them, to make them smaller, weaker, more afraid. Unafraid. Or they can use it as a forge, a means of transformation, a path towards something greater. Those who choose to face suffering rather than run from it, who refuse to be consumed by it, who find meaning within it, those people become stronger than they ever thought possible. Sacrifice is not just about giving something up. It is about exchanging something of lesser value for something greater. Every choice a person makes is, at its core, a sacrifice. When you decide to pursue one path, you are simultaneously closing off another. The question is not whether you will make sacrifices, but whether those sacrifices will be made consciously with purpose or unconsciously through avoidance and neglect. The person who refuses to sacrifice for their future inevitably sacrifices their future itself. And people often believe they can have everything at once, that they can achieve success without struggle, that they can enjoy all the pleasures of the present while still securing a prosperous future. But reality does not work this way. Anything of value requires the sacrifice of something else. A person who wants to build a great career must sacrifice leisure time, distractions, and comfort. A person who wants a strong relationship must sacrifice selfishness, short-term gratification, and the desire for constant validation. A person who wants to be healthy must sacrifice poor eating habits, laziness, and the comfort of staying the same. The refusal to sacrifice always leads to suffering, but it is a kind of suffering without meaning. Suffering that results not from the pursuit of something greater, but from the consequences of inaction. Sacrifice is the foundation of all progress. It is the fundamental principle behind discipline, growth, and success. The ancient concept of sacrifice, giving up something now in order to receive something greater later, is woven into the structure of reality itself. A farmer must plant seeds and tend to them, sacrificing time and effort before reaping a harvest. A student must study for years before gaining the knowledge and skills that will allow them to build a meaningful career. A person who seeks deep and lasting fulfillment must forego the fleeting pleasures that bring only momentary satisfaction. The greatest rewards in life do not come freely. They must be earned. They must be earned. And they are earned through sacrifice. The problem is that many people do not want to choose their sacrifice. And they want to believe they can avoid it entirely, but sacrifice is not optional. If you refuse to make conscious sacrifices, life will impose them on you in ways you do not expect and cannot control. The person who refuses to sacrifice their unhealthy habits will eventually sacrifice their health. The person who refuses to sacrifice time and effort to develop skills will sacrifice their future opportunities. The person who refuses to sacrifice toxic relationships will sacrifice their peace of mind. There is always a cost, whether you acknowledge it or not. The only real choice is whether you will pay that cost willingly and purposefully, or whether you will let life extract it from you in ways you never intended. The most successful people are those who understand this principle deeply. They know that short-term comfort often leads to long-term suffering, while short-term sacrifice leads to long-term reward. They do not resent sacrifice, they embrace it. They understand that every hour spent working toward their goals, every moment of discomfort endured in pursuit of something greater, every opportunity for immediate pleasure they forego in favor of a greater purpose is an investment. They willingly choose what to sacrifice because they have a clear vision of what they want to build. But there are many who fail to grasp this. They want the rewards without the cost. They want strength without struggle, wisdom without experience, success without effort. They envy those who have achieved great things, but they do not see the sacrifices those people have made. They assume that luck, talent, or privilege is responsible, but they ignore the years of work, the rejection, the failures, the discipline that made success possible. They do not see the nights spent studying while others were partying, the early mornings at the gym while others were sleeping, the financial sacrifices made while others were indulging in temporary pleasures. Every great achievement is built on a foundation of sacrifice. There is also another danger, sacrificing for the wrong things. Some people sacrifice their values, their integrity, or their relationships in pursuit of goals that ultimately bring them no fulfillment. They chase money, status, or external validation, only to find that what they have sacrificed in the process was far more valuable than what they gained. Now, not all sacrifices are equal, and not all are worth making. The key is to ensure that what you sacrifice is of lesser value than what you are working toward. Sacrificing your well-being, your moral compass, or your relationships for the sake of superficial success is a false bargain. The sacrifice must be aligned with a higher purpose, something that brings true meaning. The willingness to sacrifice is what separates those who build extraordinary lives from those who remain stuck in mediocrity. The person who refuses to sacrifice in the present will always pay a greater price in the future. Those who understand this do not see sacrifice as a loss, but as an investment. They recognize that to gain something truly valuable, something must be given up in return.